Good morning and welcome to the second annual Open Generation Summit. I hope everyone had a great weekend and has a good coffee or tea in hand. Please join us for what will be an exciting and informative event. I'm your co-host, Ajit Kahadua, Managing Director of Incubation at MITRE Engenuity.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Leila Ribeiro, your co-host too. I'm with MITRE Engenuity and I serve as a Technology Director for the Open Generation Consortium. This is a 6-part event and we hope you can join us for all of them. This is an interactive session, and so please use meeting polls where we have polls and you can ask questions to our experts.
Thank you, Leila. I'm looking forward to all these sessions as well. It's going to be an incredible day. I hope everyone will get a lot out of it. To open the summit on the importance of accelerating 5G is Laurie Giandomenico, who is the Vice President and Chief Acceleration Officer at MITRE. In this role, Laurie leads strategic development, growth efforts at the MITRE Accelerator, as well as MITRE Engenuity. She also launched a public company called SecureG. She advances MITRE Lab's state-of-the-art capabilities to create generational impact for public good. Laurie holds a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering and biomedical engineering from the University of Connecticut, as well as a master's from Cornell and a PhD in nutrition, health, and organization development. Thank you, Laurie, for joining us today.
Thanks, Ajit and Leila. Great to be here. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be. Welcome to the MITRE Engenuity Open Generation 5G Summit. It's great to have you here. I first want to thank our change-making members as we celebrate a year of working together on use case innovation in 5G. From our founding members, you see across the top, to our associate members, to our affiliates, as well as Qualcomm, our newest member, we launched MITRE Engenuity, our tech foundation for public good, to work across industry on whole-of-nation challenges, to align commercial interests with an interest in our national security and economic stability, and to promulgate what we call innovation for public good in order to leave a lasting generational impact. Over the next 2 days, our hope is that we come to a common understanding of what we mean by innovation for public good. Executive thought leadership from our founding membership and government advisory panel will discuss the impact of 5G on our future and the role that the US must take in creating a global alliance of democratic nations to accelerate innovation in this critical industry. Some people ask, what exactly is 5G? Many of you know that these are the defining 5G capability requirements to enable transformative use cases. The metrics required for wireless networks to truly manage and create a connected world. In 4G, where the US led the app economy, which had tremendous end consumer impact, 5G will transform how businesses will work. The advent of ultra-low latency, high reliability, plus high device density systems transform automation, which means a greater reliance on AI to operate these systems and on robots to perform tasks. Leading this evolution will be essential to ensuring our businesses and democratic innovation continue to prevail. So the work that our members are undertaking isn't just about commercialization. It's also about economic stability and national security and where these two come together. A key differentiator of our Open Generation 5G industry collaboration, and I call it a collaboration because it's not just a consortium, we're actually doing experimentation, is that it affords our members the ability to accelerate use case innovation by working on technology breakthroughs, enabling standards, and experimentation that informs policy all at the same time. Something that no one company or organization can do. Because technology breakthroughs don't mean much if they can't be commercialized and create impact in our lives. So I want to show next a picture. Billy, if you could go to the next one. This is the drone cage in Blacksburg at the Virginia Tech campus, where the team conducted experiments over the last year. The Open Generation membership has demonstrated important results piloting UAS over 5G. Through that experimentation, we're able to benchmark the latency and payload differences between LTE and 5G. This data is defining the next phase of testing. It will form the foundational research that will inform policy, shape standards, and drive the next wave of experimentation. For anyone interested in reading that paper, we made it available on the website as well. This morning, Governor Hochul of New York will announce the MITRE Engenuity Open Generation 5G aviation range. So I'm announcing it right here to you guys, just a few minutes. before the press release hits. And this is our new 5G aviation range we'll be working on that will include an experimentation hub with over 100 square miles of 5G beyond visual line of sight testing within a 5-mile long drone park managed by Newair, one of 7 FAA designated UAS test sites. With equipment and expertise from Nokia, spectrum use rights from Verizon, and MITRE's deep bench of experts in aviation and communications technologies, we're outfitting the UAS range owned by Oneida County and managed by Newair with a private 5G network to create an unprecedented dynamic 5G aviation range. Through further collaboration, the 5G range will add long-range 5G flight paths that circumvent various topographies with varying aviation considerations. So ranging from over water and wilderness to over people and near airports to test a variety of use cases while aligning with the FAA Advisory and Rulemaking Committee UAS BVLOS ARC Charter. You can't really see in the map here, but you get a little bit of a sense of the variation of the topography, which is going to be essential to our experimentation and testing. Today, you'll hear from a variety of experts who will discuss technology, standards, and policy related to our use case innovation effort. From the underpinning concept of innovation for public good, to the 5G R&D work that will be undertaken this year, to the vision of creating a 100 square mile path for 5G experimentation to accelerate 5G use case innovation in the US, our leaders will cover a variety of topics. This will also include a discussion on use cases that will change how we live and work and why UAS is the defining use case and the intrinsic value of 5G architecture by looking at the future of 5G drones and how this transforms the industry. Tomorrow, a variety of speakers across industry, government, and academia will discuss our national interests and the vital role 5G plays in securing our nation and our economy. They'll also talk about 5G implementation and the strengths, challenges, and opportunities implementing UAS and 5G, as well as a presentation of the industry in numbers and a vision of connectivity in aviation and the standards that are required to make this happen. So it's a pretty exciting lineup for the next 2 days. I hope you'll stick with us. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our first esteemed speaker, the Honorable Mike Rogers. Mike is our Vice Chairman, soon to be Chairman of the Board of Trustees for the MITRE Corporation, and has been actively involved in furthering the interests of the US and other democratic nations in 5G, and is also a national security commentator. Mike represented Michigan's 8th Congressional District in the US House of Representatives from 2001 to 2015, and before serving in Congress was an officer in the US Army and FBI special agent. Since leaving public office, he founded the Mike Rogers Center for Intelligence and Global Affairs, which works as part of the Global Digital Challenge Initiative to bring together leaders in technology communities to discuss issues relevant to the global digital economy. Mike, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thanks, Laurie. I appreciate it. And Ajit and Layla, thank you very much for the work that you've done. Exciting times, I think. And thanks for having me here to be a part of what I think is going to be a very productive summit on what I think is, our national security strategic interest. It has to be in the top 5 for sure, if not number 1, if we don't get it right. And I know tomorrow you're going to talk about standards, but think about this. Right now, we are on the path with our Western allies to have multiple different standard sets that are bifurcated across what we would know as our allied and Western liberal democracies, where our competitor, someone who wants to beat us and is willing to use government subsidized efforts, government promotion, and government requirements to get their companies, China's companies like Huawei, into first place. And they do that because they want to make sure that they are data dominant by 2025. They're not hiding anything from us. And if you look at the heat map around the world, companies like Huawei dominate Latin America, Africa, Indonesia, Middle East. They have presence in just about all the regions of the world that we would care about as a country and our national security for sure. When you look at what's happening there, the race is on. 5G is going to be an incredibly important part of that as we look at what those sensors and what that data, what that Internet of Things is going to do both to our security and our economy. It is a race which we cannot come in second. Today's summit's going to go through some of the challenges of that and certainly some of the opportunities. So I'm excited to be about part of that. And I'm excited that MITRE is a part of it. We're a not-for-profit public mission company, doesn't have a dog in the fight, but certainly wants the end game to stand up for what can be great for the private sector and our economic security, as well as our national security in many of our Department of Defense sponsors. So if you look at where we are, I mean, this next decade will be the decade of connected IoT devices, billions of sensors. Matter of fact, maybe we should call it the no buffering decade. It needs to be real-time and near real-time situational awareness on all of those sensors. And if we have anything that is unmanned moving, I don't care if it's below water, on the land, or in the air, think about the latency challenges and the analytics that are going to be required for the data that those devices are emanating and we're receiving, and then turning it right back around, trying to get it back in the hands of a device that can actually make a decision in near a real time that avoids calamity. I mean, think about it. Now we're going to have to go through, and this is why this test range is so important, is that information flying around, is it corrupted? What data collected is relevant? Imagine all of the data being flown around and collected. What part of that is relative to real-time, near real-time decision-making by that device? How do we move that data? How do we move that data securely? Is encryption a big part of that? How do we analyze that data in a way, again, that maximizes the efficiency of that data that's being moved and being utilized for decision-making? What AI and machine learning algorithms and functions are going to be the most important to apply, and how do we continue to improve those over time? Well, when you think about all of that data and you're flying into that data, think of this. So we're getting ready for what I think is this great power competition. We're actually in it. Our main adversary, China, is moving out, and they're doing it in all the ways we just talked about earlier. But I argue you train like you fight, and that's again why this test range is so important. We're going to put together data scientists and private enterprise and government and academia in a place where they can have over the horizon, beyond visual observation, to fly these devices in a 5G environment. And we're going to get to look at all of the inputs and what that means for improving the way we both secure and advance that technology. Very rarely are you going to see something of this magnitude coming together, with this kind of talent coming together to fix this problem. And again, train like you fight, and imagine the kinds of things we're going to learn out of this. And by the way, that's how you beat the Chinese Communist Party. We do it through this innovation, these private-public partnerships. We do it by putting our best talent in the same place, having a range like this to test real-life theories in an environment that doesn't get anybody hurt. I mean, to me, that's exciting. And think about all the things that came out of, well, say the space program, lots of public and private partnerships, certainly something that was a call to a nation. I think 5G is equally as big as that call to that nation at that time. I mean, laptops came out of that, cell phone cameras came out of that. Well, maybe that isn't as great as we thought. Wireless headphones, memory foam, water purification, solar energy, and how we translate that into electricity, all came out of those NASA programs trying to get people up in space and functioning in space. Toothpaste in a tube. So I tell all my data scientists now, all of the folks who are working on this, all you cyber folks, you that maybe you'd tell your families if you don't feel like telling the whole thing, that this is your effort and your generation to put toothpaste in that tube. That's really what you're doing here. All of the technology, all of the excitement that's going to come out of this, all of the innovation is going to be pretty spectacular. I don't think there's any way you put that kind of intellectual capital on the same target in the same place doing that work without something amazing happening. So I'm obviously very proud that MITRE is a part of that, and I'm a part of our MITRE team. But again, all of the data scientists, all of the private enterprise, all of the government agencies who are going to participate, all of academia, all of the FFRDCs that might have an opportunity to play here are going to make a difference to push back on what we know China's desire for data dominance in 2025, and how to use that data. And that's where I think that innovation, that's where I think we're going to be different. That's where I think this effort and your participation in this effort is going to make that kind of a difference. You know, I had the great fortune when I was a kid. Of course, I'm a Michigan guy, so we talk about cars all the time if you're from Michigan. I had the great fortune along my career to work in a car factory. And I can't tell you how important that is to the economy of the state of Michigan and part of the ecosystem for manufacturing across the country, and the ability to perform at rates with a quality workforce that really is unparalleled in the world. And I have to tell you, it made me think back a little bit about some of the stories that we're very proud of in the state of Michigan. One is right up to World War II. We weren't doing all that well. We had not invested in our military. We had not invested in the production capability of a military. And we were behind. Matter of fact, going into World War II, we were ranked behind the country of Brazil in our military quality and standing in the world. I think it was something like 16th or 18th in the world is where we fell. At the time, we had something like 3,000 warplanes of all sorts. Most of those were outdated. In our entire arsenal, 3,000 airplanes. You can imagine the consternation as the world started heating up and trouble started happening. And you saw what was happening in the East with Japan, the West with Germany. It was very, very concerning. And so Congress and the president got together and said, we need to change this, and we need to change it in a hurry. And we need to challenge our industrial base to build 50,000 airplanes in a very short period of time, less than a year. Most people scoffed and said it couldn't be done. And if you think about why this is big, so Henry Ford, by the way, and a guy named Sorensen, who was his chief engineer, on a back of a napkin, true story, kind of laid out a plan how they could take truck manufacturing in a place called Ypsilanti, Michigan, and make it into B-24 bomber production. People said it couldn't be done. Think about it. Average car at that time, 15,000 parts, weighed about 3,000 pounds. They needed 50,000 aircraft. They needed it in a hurry. A B-24 had 450,000 parts. Think of the science of trying to build that assembly line to do 450,000 parts, coming up from 15,000. 360,000 outside of the parts, rivets in 550 different sizes. Imagine the challenge of that, trying to engineer that production line with that complexity, that fast. The average plane weighed about 18 tons. So 3,000 pounds, a little over a ton, to 18 tons. You know, there was all the aviation experts. One of my favorite quotes that they have posted in the museum there is, you can't expect a blacksmith to make a watch overnight. Everybody was convinced that this could not be done. America wouldn't rise to the occasion. I have to tell you, we all know the end of that story. At peak production, the B-24 was being produced at 1 per hour, which was an amazing feat at the time. Matter of fact, the Germans came out at the time we announced this $50,000 purchase, said can't be done, wouldn't be done. That it actually improved the performance of the B-17. It had a top speed of 300 miles per hour, and it carried a payload of 6 tons, nearly double what the B-17 could carry. And which was absolutely critical for us trying to do the air domination campaign in Western Europe. And so you think about what happened there is all the best of America came together, engineers, private sector, government, everybody came together to solve a problem that was almost instantaneous. It was upon them. The war was coming. Could we meet the challenge in the United States? And women came to the workforce in huge numbers. About 15% of that workforce over time were women, which was unheard of at the time in the 1940s. To actually build Rosie the Riveter, we take credit for, came out and we think the plant in Ypsilanti, Michigan. And we're not sure if that's true or not, but we're not going to research it too much because we want to take credit for that. So Rosie the Riveter came out of that effort to help build world-class fighter aircraft that helped us win World War II, and for us and our allies. An amazing feat, an amazing engineering feat. Well, you think about where we are today, and I argue that this consortium is a big piece of what's going to happen there. All the engineering that came out of trying to build an airplane that fast in that short period of time. And by the way, they said 50,000. Ford actually put out 100,000 airplanes in 2.5 years. Amazing accomplishment for our industrial base in the United States. And you think about what we're talking about today, we're a little behind. 5G is moving out across the world with Chinese standards, Chinese application of what they've learned along the way. And they want to dominate that market. They want to dominate the data that comes with that. They're going to try to find out and innovate on top of that. They understand that both it has economic benefit for them as well as national security benefit for them. Well, we know that too. The people on this, in the part of this consortium, this 400, 500 people who have signed up today for this, also know, and I hope you know, how important it is both to our economic security, but our national security. This effort really does mean the difference between dominating into the next generation or being second place, being told by Chinese Communist Party what our standards are going to be in telecommunications build out, in AI algorithms, in the way we apply this data to solve real problems in people's lives. All of that's going to happen. So I say this, thanks for coming, thanks for participating, thanks certainly to the MITRE team for being a big part of this. This is our Ypsilanti call in our generation. I really believe that. This is our chance. This test range is now the opportunity to do the very thing, to put out 50,000 airplanes when nobody else thought you could, to figure out the technical problems that are coming with an unmanned aerial vehicle flying, and all of the good things and technology innovation that waterfalls off of that is happening today. It's happening now. That announcement today is big and significant. You should take it that way. I hope you're as excited as I am to get into this fight, to win this fight, to be the dominant player in this technology and be the 5G leader of the world, because no one can do it like the United States for the purposes of which we want. So thank you very, very much. Thanks for having me. Good luck and Godspeed on your efforts today.
Thank you, Laurie and Mike, for that thought-provoking and inspirational keynotes to kick off the summit. I hope everyone appreciates that 5G's impact to the world could be greater than the space program and bring generational impact to the world. Leila, I'd like to ask you, what were your takeaways from what Laurie and Mike were saying?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm also very excited about the announcement of the aviation range, and I think it will provide a great opportunity for us to, I mean, connecting also with what Mike said, to experiment with the toothpaste tubes, and so we can experiment with different designs, different solutions, and that collaboration of minds and freedom to experiment definitely is what we need to foster the innovation to win on the challenges that Mike was mentioning. So very excited about this. I think that there are plenty of opportunities to evolve from what we did in the early experiments that Laurie presented into experimenting with priority use cases and improving connectivity for drones, improving applying artificial intelligence and edge computing and so on. So very excited.
Yeah, I think my takeaways were tied to the fact that we need an ecosystem of companies to bring together to be able to industrialize 5G. That's a really important difference from in the past. To build these next generation systems, we need network providers, we need device providers, we need software application providers. Everyone needs to come together, and the chance to be able to fly drones beyond visual line of sight in a all-weather environment just seems incredibly interesting. And maybe we will find the next toothpaste application, as Mike says. Maybe that's the grand takeaway for today, is we all have to work together to find something as interesting as the toothpaste tube and the impact for the rest of the world. I'd like to now move on to talking about an interesting panel that we're going to have. I'd like to introduce a few different people with Leila to talk more about what we're doing in upstate New York with the drone range. First, I'd like to introduce Thierry Klein, who is the Vice President, Enterprise and Industrial Automation Research Lab at Nokia, who is also a founding member of Opengen and is contributing to the US range with network equipment. Theory is leading a global research team dedicated to applied research, innovation, and advanced technologies within Nokia Bell Labs.
Okay, and I would like to introduce Ken Stewart. Ken Stewart is the president and CEO of New Air. And New Air is the organization that manages the 5G aviation range that was just announced by Laurie to be deployed in upstate New York. And I would also like to introduce Jerry Libunau. Jerry is a distinguished engineer at Verizon Communications, supporting wireless standardization and industry engagements, and a founding member of Open Generation. Verizon is a key contributor to the aviation range as well.
Welcome, everybody. So I'd like to get started with asking Ken. Ken, what are you excited about on being able to have this range up and running?
So actually really excited about getting 5G up here. We've been testing on multiple networks for quite some time, but 5G really shows the promise to really manage data off the drones. A couple things that Mike talked about, really the IoT space and the drones really fitting into that space. Well, how do we consume data off these drones? We fly operations that pull in a terabyte of data an hour, and on current networks, that really is your family plans gone in about the first 5 minutes. So it's great to have different networks, different spectrum available to really take access to what we can do with these drones. The other thing I just want to say really quickly is, Mike, it's great to see that you're from Michigan, because Michigan actually happens to be partners with us here in the Alliance. So we have 2 state partners in Massachusetts and Michigan. So it's not just about New York, it's about the whole Northeast quarter.
Theory, maybe you'd like to talk a little bit about how the Nokia equipment is going to be utilized in the drone range.
Yeah, thanks, Ajit. First, I want to say it's really an honor to be part of Opengen as a consortium and really be part of the corridor with Ken and Jerry at Verizon. So it's really a great opportunity to really advance the technologies. And for us, it's really all about taking equipment that we have, that we deploy, but also really understanding the capabilities of that equipment for these very advanced use cases, understanding the technology, understanding the limits of the technology, and then really pushing through to innovate and develop new capabilities. So we have really the most advanced networks for the most advanced applications, and that can only happen in a test bed. You have to take it outside of the lab. You have to take the equipment and the innovation into the real world, innovate with real world applications, and you can only do it with partners. So Opengen and the corridor is really the perfect example of how you want to innovate in today's world, with different people, different background, different expertise, different stakeholders collaborating together to advance our common interests.
Okay. And Jerry, maybe you'd like to comment about how the Verizon network is part of the range, as well as all the other exciting things Verizon's doing with drones.
Jerry, you're on mute.
Okay, sorry about that. So thank you, Ajit. We are excited and look forward to greater and bigger things. So as we start to look at the key industry that the consortium has been working on, working very closely with industries, verticals, and not to mention the best of academia. This solution will go through experimentation. We start with private testbed, but it all culminates to what comes out of that has a clear path to commercialization. Of course, the goal here is to ensure the U.S. leadership, by looking also at societal impact, right? And the point that I took away earlier was public-private partnership is key to the whole thing, right? So if I look at the drone corridor in upstate New York, I see a good model that's emerging, already taking into account the partnership with United County, the state of New York. And if we look at extending, the test bed to, the drone corridor using 5G commercial network, that pretty much put everything together, right? And it's actually pretty exciting. But the challenge here is how do we accelerate that, right? Given the fact that a lot of activities around standards, are still work in progress. And I think this is the unique opportunity in the consortium that Verizon, certainly will be a part of in terms of driving this, future into a reality now, right? Starting with R&D and innovation, and in the end, the consortium can feed into a lot of the standards and all the activities just to make sure that we finally get into a drone economy that will be impactful.
Thanks, Jerry. Great comments. Leila, maybe you'd like to ask some questions from our panelists.
Yes. Ken, what do you think would be some of the key challenges that we'll have in terms of the deployment?
Sure. So I think, the challenges we have are no different than we see in our kind of day-to-day life is coverage that's economically affordable. And so how do we get that kind of access? Drones may or may not follow existing kind of conventional corridors we have called highways. They may fly in what we call Class G airspace where we have more limited coverage. So the key is going to be how do we get those networks up and running in a cost-effective way where we can access and utilize that spectrum. And, kind of the other challenge is most of our cellular users today or wireless users today are terrestrial based. And so most of our towers point down. So we have a little bit of an azimuth issue to approach in this space as well for those technophiles out there. But really, it's the challenges are no different that we have today. It's really building the most economically efficient network coverage that we can get. And I think what we'll see is potentially some areas, kind of Jerry talked about. We'll see 5G and other technologies pop up in certain areas where we know the traffic is going to be, where we know and they can benefit from having that coverage. So I think time will tell as we work through all the tests that we'll be conducting up here, but we think 5G offers a lot of opportunity.
Great, thank you. And Thierry, on some of those challenges that Ken just mentioned, where do you see opportunity that 5G brings to the table in terms of capabilities that to overcome those challenges?
Yeah, Leila, I think it's multifold. I think it's when you think about drones and you think about the drone application, we really think about an autonomous set of drones in the future. It's the drones will be the primary use case for autonomous systems, and autonomous systems will have two essential parts in my mind. One is controlling the autonomous system, so controlling the drones. So we need the reliable, low latency network just to be able to autonomously control the drones in a safe and efficient way. So I think it's really about the capacity of the network and the low latency for the control of the system. But then the drones are really performing a particular function, whether it's payload delivery, whether it's inspection, whether it's emergency response. So we also have to really think about what are the applications and the use cases. And again, the network will be critical to support the application, whether it's a video surveillance application, whether it's a monitoring, whether it's a delivery of particular packages or medication and so forth. So I think the 5G network will really support the control of the system as well as then the payload application, and that duality will be very important. And I think we have the technology with 5G to support both. And to I think Ken's point and Jerry's point also, it's what are the drones doing? What's the business opportunity? How do you solve a real problem? And we need to really work on both aspects.
Thank you, Thierry. And Jerry, one more question for you. In terms of what Thierry just mentioned and supporting the use cases for drones, what would be a good criteria to select the key use cases to look at in terms of experiments for this aviation range?
Okay. Okay. Let me start with, within the consortium, we have actually taken on, key industry use cases, correct? Right. One thing interesting about drone and connected drones, right, is if we take away the first initial step of safe integration in the national airspace, safe flight operations. And we're going to talk to that in the other segments as part of the two-day summit. and also looking to make sure that we protect the terrestrial network from this, scaling in terms of numbers of connected drones. Drones actually apply in all of the different vertical, not to mention public safety, first responder, government, right? And I believe there's only one way to find it out. We have to make sure that we reach out of the consortium, inviting the key verticals to participate, right? And it is in that simple but active, collaboration that we would flesh out the exact needs that I'm sure that we have the capabilities within the 5G foundation, as well as the convergence of a bunch of these breakthrough technologies. And hopefully we've done our job in terms of setting up the architecture that's future proof and extendable, right? Not just for 5G connected drones, but even the other verticals, right? So I think that would be my response to you. It just applies to all the industry, and I think it's a defining moment that if we can enable drone economy to create jobs, right, and unleash all of this transformation in how we basically live and work and even protect ourselves, right? And get help in times of disasters and emergency. Um, it's really upon all of us in terms of how we want to make that happen, sooner than later.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll ask a question, Ken. I don't think a lot of people are familiar with upstate New York and the range. Maybe you should tell us a little bit more about the environment up there and what we're going to be flying around, especially during the different parts of the year and the landscape itself?
Sure. So the UAS test site located out in Rome, New York, is actually located at Griffiths International Airport. It's one of the only of the 7 designated UAS test sites that actually is based at an airport. And so not only do we have the airport facilities, but direct relationship with the air traffic controllers there at that site. Syracuse International at the other end of the corridor actually has been flying unmanned military aircraft and is the only airport in the country where unmanned military aircraft take off right next to conventional aircraft or commercial aircraft. So we've had an integrated airspace up here for a good part of 6 years. The other part is you mentioned 4 seasons. So, Syracuse and upstate New York definitely gets its share of snow. I think it vies for Buffalo as the snowiest city in the United States. So we do all season, all weather flights. So our concerns in the winter, obviously things like de-icing. Summers up here, fall, spring are all beautiful. So we have great conditions to fly year round. But we've also got throughout the corridor, we've got all of our sensing put up. We have 9 different radar systems, all tuned for drone. We have ADS-B in, so it's highly censored, kind of really controlled airspace for us to really take not only the flights we do at our test site, where we also have a 4 by 8 mile beyond visual line of sight corridor that we can fly virtually any aircraft in beyond visual line of sight. We're also partnered with organizations like the Department of Homeland Security Emergency Services up here. So a little bit of what Jerry talked about is having access to first responders. We partner with some of the public-private partnerships here in New York out of our test site. For example, like different thruway authorities where we can actually help them do bridge inspections. So all the things that both Theory and Jerry talked about, drone operations really fall into 2 major buckets. Data collection, so inspection or video capture for first responder, or delivery. You're delivering something, or either via first responder or you're delivering a package. So they kind of fall in those 2 buckets. So we do a lot of focus on those areas, and what we do here at the test site is focus on the early emerging spaces where there's a good ROI. And if you can just bear with me for a minute, I'll give you a great example of some of those ROIs that we see. Bridge inspections. So bridge inspections don't necessarily require the beyond visual line of sight. So that means it's something we can do today. In the New York State, we have 17,600 bridges, all of which have to be inspected every 2 years. Using drones versus traditional methods means we can save about $17,000 per bridge, and that has to be done every 2 years. That's about $140 million of savings for the state of New York by moving to this technology. Doesn't require advanced operations, just requires the right pilot and the right equipment. So those are things we're doing early, but obviously we want to be able to do those in the future. And that's the whole point about having the 5G and the beyond visual line of sight, to be able to get that data to those who need it in the real time ways that we expect to consume data today. So thank you.
Yeah, Ken, that's really interesting. The the economic impact is, that from what we're going to be able to see from testing on your range is, if you just think about the bridges, there's probably a lot of other areas as well where when we use drones, we can change the economics for public good.
For sure.
Hey, Ajit, if I may add something real quick. I think what's unique about where New Air is situated, with anchored on a towered airport at Griffiths, and by the way, there's Syracuse on the left-hand side of that with Syracuse International. And to your question, Lila, earlier, advanced air mobility is really, I think, an opportunity that we should look at, given the fact that it is already, I guess, in scope of what the FAA has in terms of making New Air in Upstate New York as a corridor, not just for UTM, but UAM and AAM, right? So I believe that is actually one impactful, use case that really we should take, in the corridor. And what I'm hoping, Ken, as you work with local and the state, that we can, replicate this around the country.
For sure. That's why we have partnerships with other states. Whatever we can prove out here in the state of New York, our partners can then roll out in those states. And we get really kind of same across all 50 states and can then roll these out even faster.
Yeah, and thank you, Jerry, also for the comment on the key use cases. And I agree, examples like advanced air mobility, where there is a lot to learn. And what a better opportunity than to experiment, than to see, what we learn in terms of requirements, in terms of possibilities, reliability, being safety critical. We need to learn on what is doable in terms of how much we can trust the connectivity, and what needs to be improved as well. And from that, I see an opportunity for contribution to the standards to actually help enable, and as Jerry said, accelerate this, right? So if we contribute in terms of what we learn and the proposed innovations. What are your thoughts in terms of the key opportunities in terms of standards contributions coming from these experiments that we'll have at the aviation range? Anyone who would like to come first?
Sure, I'll jump in. So when you think about advanced air mobility and the contributions this may play, the evolution of really UAS into advanced air mobility is really about intermodal transportation. And so when you think about the opportunity to create distribution or connectivity to distribution centers, warehouses become those new ports. And so Jerry brought up National Airport. Well, what greater place for a distribution center than an airport that has all the major package carriers, DHL, FedEx, Amazon, UPS, I'm sure I'm leaving off a few others, but we also have distribution centers throughout the area. And so how do you connect those with urban air mobility? We actually already have a charging station for eVTOL at our airport. So when you think about leaning to the future, we're ready for them to come and we can charge them on site. We've also worked with NASA for vertiport automation services requirements to help develop those for the industry. So it really is about all those things that you think about leaning forward to the future. That's what a test site's for. How do you prove these technologies out, create these corridors, help this intermodal transportation really take the next step in its evolution?
That's a really good point, Ken, because it's not just our testing beyond visual line of sight. This is transformational to the entire supply chain and how things work. I'd like to ask Thierry a question here, because it's I don't know whether everyone realizes this, but in theory, Nokia is providing the equipment, but we're also doing it in a different way, right? It's not just base stations on the ground. We're using cloud technology as well to be able to provide the solution here for testing BV loss. Can you go into what Nokia is doing there?
Yeah, thanks, Ajit. I think, again, to maybe the earlier point, we think the cloud is really enabling us to advance the capabilities by moving the functions that are typically in the radio in the base station, but looking at new architectures that open up the interface. If you think about the Open RAN Alliance and new network architectures, that's really allowing the innovation to open up. And by opening the interfaces, opening up the architecture, bringing additional capabilities in, and really leveraging the power of the compute capabilities we have in the cloud as well, so that a lot of the functions that you would run in the network or at the radio head, you move them back into the cloud. And then the cloud is really important for the network evolution, but I think especially also with the drones, the taking advantage of the cloud capabilities is important for the drones themselves, because the drones are size, weight, power constrained platforms. And how much of the compute capabilities are we putting on the drones versus putting those capabilities into the cloud infrastructure where we have a lot more compute resources? And whether this is for the control of the drones or for the applications, the payload applications. And a lot of that is only possible because you have the 5G network that allows you to offload those functions. And so we think very much, again, in this duality between the control of the drones, the networking part, as well as the application. And the fact that we have 5G, we really believe enables a new paradigm shift of where you perform the functions, whether it's from a networking perspective, connectivity perspective, the drone control applications, or the payload applications. And it's really an exciting time because the 5G capabilities from a latency, throughput, reliability really open up a lot of possibilities to harness the cloud that maybe a few years back we didn't even have.
Great, that's fantastic. Yeah, that's really going to be a game changer, I think, from traditional 4G networks, and how with the drone systems we can bring cloud technology to bear, and it has a significant impact to the application. Jerry, from a network operator perspective, how are you looking at cloud technology in the drone and UAS use cases?
5G certainly was built from the ground up, with service and cloud native as a key architectural principle, right? And all these capabilities that 5G provide, it's not actually unique to drones. As many verticals will certainly transform themselves taking advantage of that. So if we can solve the safe integration part, the protection of the terrestrial network from interference, then it becomes less of a drone. We know it's going to be safe. But what comes next is the long tail of what this drone economy is all about, right? How can we scale this quickly to take advantage of the public cloud that's already making its big disruptive waves across? How do we take on the edge computing along with that as well, to realize the requirements of even a critical infrastructure where drones and automated vehicles can come together? How do we draw the analytics that come from the network and these devices in a way that, using aviation terminology, can provide supplemental data to the UTM as well as the existing ATM as they will be integrated? So there's a lot of reuse, security is in place, privacy is in place, and really creating a significant economy of scale, across the vertical, to include the transportation as a service, right? And how each of the enterprises will use drone, right, to actually further enhance what they do and what they provide to us.
Very good. So I do have a question for Ken. Ken, we have talked about this, the value of the public-private partnership. And so one more component, we talked about the benefits of standards and providing inputs to accelerate standards. But there are also the aspects of proving that beyond visual line of sight operations are safe, and how that can help accelerate the approval of these types of operations. I would like to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. So many of you may know that the FAA is actually under rulemaking right now begun the policy and rulemaking for beyond visual line of sight. We would expect out of this rulemaking committee, which New Air is a part of, probably the baseline for the policy to come out, and then obviously go through the NPRM process, and probably be available in about 2.5 years, I think, from a regulatory process. But we have to build up to that. And so as we learn through this policy making, we also test through this policy making. And one of the challenges of the airspace is very different. We talk about network assurance and things like that. We always say 5 nines with the network. Well, the safety level for the national airspace is 10 to the -9th. So by far greater requirements on keeping our airspace safe. And so those are really the challenges that we're working through. But like I said, we fly up here at our test site testing these items In fact, we have 2 major flights coming up here doing some algae bloom and some canal flights for the Power Authority that we're constantly pushing that envelope for. And all that data we capture while we're doing this in parallel with the policymaking, we provide back to the FAA to help usher that kind of policymaking and regulations along. Thank you.
Great, very good.
Great question.
So we have a question from the audience, and we'll always encourage everyone to participate interactively with this virtual event. So there's a question, and I'll leave it to any of the 3 of you to answer, but there's a question asking, what has Opengen done to enable something that hasn't been able to have been conducted before in this industry? From any of the 3 of you, what would you say as being part of this R&D collaboration consortium you've been able to do?
I can maybe start, and then I'll let Ken and Jerry comment from their perspective. I think there's a lot of things that we've already been able to accomplish. I think one is the test bed in Virginia Tech that Leila mentioned and Laurie mentioned in her opening remarks as well. Testing the initial capabilities of 5G on drones. I think quite a bit of accomplishment there. I think the main thing that I would take away from the first year of Opengen is really aligning where we want to go. I think we spend a lot of effort on identifying what are the key use cases that we want to focus on. And I think when we started, we had a long list of potential use cases, but which are the critical ones? Which are the canonical use cases that are representative of much larger set of use cases? And what are the defining requirements and characteristics of the use case that we will then validate against the architecture and then validate in the test beds. So I think not having just a laundry list, but having the right list of use cases and capabilities you test. And I think that's been a key accomplishment. Same thing on the architecture side. What are the architectural options that we want to investigate, and really figuring out where do we see the sweet spot from a technology use case. And then the test beds. I think it's been tremendous effort to get to this point in terms of identifying the test bed, the implementations, not just the one in New Air, but we also have other test bed capabilities that we're building up, including indoor drone testing. And I think really that's been a major accomplishment, and that could only have happened by having the different stakeholders, not just Ken, Jerry, and myself, but also all the other members, including from the use case as well as from the drones themselves, including academia, including some of the other organizations that are part of it, and really aligning where we want to go and where we see the biggest opportunity.
Thanks, Larry. Any other comments? Jerry, I believe you're muted again.
Okay, we're off to a good start in the consortium. We have identified 4 key use cases, 3 of them outdoor, 1 indoor. As we look into finalizing architecture and setting up all these test beds to allow, implementation, I think it's important to note that we have to look into inviting, key vertical, drone operators, if you will, to come in and collaborate, help us, see this through. And I think if we achieve that, then we will have a good template, and I'm hoping a foundational architecture to further extend that to automotive vehicles or vehicle to everything infrastructure, as well as the other verticals, maybe sometime next year. But it goes without saying that we have to make sure that the key stakeholders in the respective ecosystems would be here to join the consortium effort.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's we have a great ecosystem for the UAS, but as we expand into other use cases, the consortium will need to bring in new members that are experts in those ecosystems to bring those use case and requirements to us. We appear to have another question from the audience. Thank you, audience, wherever you may be, asking about what 5G bands are supported for drones in the US, and why can't CBRS or N41 bands support drones?
Sure, I guess I can handle that. So CBRS currently doesn't allow for airborne operations in that band. The 3.5 band is generally used by the Department of Navy for aircraft carrier radars, for aircraft taking off and landing. So airborne activities or airborne use of the band is still not allowed. That being said, one of the things we actually want to be able to illustrate, and quite frankly, one of the things that we do here at the UAS test site is we do a lot of work with the DoD. I think fundamentally, there's not a lot of usage of that band by military within the contiguous 48 states. So there's a lot of opportunity to potentially see usage of that band, and we'd love to engage with the DoD on that to see if we couldn't open up that band for this. All the ecosystems here, our phones have the radios in it, so it'd be great to see that capability used. And I would also add the previous question about what has 5G kind of added. I think really the opportunity for better utilization of spectrum. Spectrum is not inexpensive to come by, and it really gives the industry better utilization because, for different operations, we can apply very specific spectrums now. And that, that high-end edge compute of software-defined radios that those new networks provide really give us the opportunity to really focus on what bands work best for these types of operations. So great question. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. And we'd like to thank Doug from Nokia, I believe, for asking that question. We appreciate that, Doug. And good to hear from you, since I think we used to work together in the past. Okay. Leila, you've been working deep in the use cases and architecture for defining Opengen and what we're going to be doing in upstate New York. What are you most interested in seeing coming out of the testing?
Yeah, very excited about the deployment, and that's coming soon, as we all know. So we are targeting to start experiments towards the end of the year. The first use cases that we are going to look at include emergency response and package delivery. So two very interesting use cases. So we are very interested in seeing whether we can meet the requirements that we are mapping for those use cases, and how we can do improvements. So the whole idea of the experimentation is to experiment with different configurations of the network, and experiment with different solutions where we can improve upon the baseline that we are going to start with. And so we are very excited to see that this coming through, and to see the results and to report the results to industry, like we did with the first proof of concept experiment we had earlier this year. We plan to publish and to the community the results we find, and to provide inputs to standards as we identify suggestions for improvements.
Yeah, Leila, that's a really great point, because Opengen is chartered with public good, and we release all of our results to the public and to government so that the industry itself can learn from what we're doing. Even if you're a member of the consortium or not, you will get the results so that you can incorporate that into your designs and any manufacturing and testing you may be wanting to do in the future. So that's a great thing from the public result that all the member companies are working towards will benefit U.S. industry, like what Mike was looking for.
Yeah, and just to put a small plug on it, we will be publishing these materials as they come in our webpage. So Laurie mentioned earlier about the proof of concept experiment report, and there is another one coming that is sort of a position paper describing our approach to use case driven collaboration. So just a suggestion to take a look when for more documents coming there.
Yeah, Leila, just to add, I think that position paper you mentioned that talks about the different use cases that we see, the different requirements, the network architectures, as well as goes into more details on the test beds and which use cases we'll be testing in which of the test beds. So yes. I think it has quite a bit of summarizing the work that we've done in the past year and looking forward to the next year of what we'll be doing.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so we have a poll that's just started for everyone joining virtually in Meeting Pulse that you can participate in. We'd love to hear from you and get your thoughts. So then we'll be publishing, I believe, those results later so you can see what everyone has contributed to there. As far as the the network itself, Jerry, I think Mike brought up, sorry, not Mike, Mike brought up the changes that are going to happen for the future with 5G coming. And Ken was talking about the interesting part about with drones, we're flying above the network. How does Verizon think they're going to be using the drone range to understand the differences in flying above the network versus traditional cellular, which is on the ground or in buildings?
If you're talking about potential interference that these connected drones to the network would cause, well, this is something that within Verizon as well as Skyward, we're already undertaking, and it's important. The standards on mitigating this in LTE has been specified back, in release 15 days. The standards, especially if we're talking about 5G and R, still has to take place as part of release 18, and therefore, we're working to get that prioritized. So it's obvious that to make all this happen, we have to make sure that we have standards-based optimization of the network that would allow and enable a true scaling, on the use of drones. So one aspect that we have discussed within the consortium is that the architecture working group will take on interference management among the other things as kind of like orthogonal and applies in all outdoor use cases, right? So that is something that I expect the consortium could be working on with respect to solutions that enhance the capability that the network would provide. And when we get to drone corridors, this is something that we can get results out of, as well as you mentioned, Laila, sharing this with appropriate entities as part of the consortium effort, right? I'd also quickly add that we are forward looking in Opengen. What that means is we are ahead even before the standards get start, like release 18 and R. So we have an opportunity where we can also provide data to help 3GPP, for example, in what they have to do. And I can go on with other activities around the world that's more kind of like on the drone or aviation side, right? And it is really that collaboration that we do that we can propel this to ensure that we have a global set of interoperability, ensuring that within the US we have a supply chain and consumption of that across the enterprise, government, including public safety, right? So in a nutshell, I'm pretty excited about the work that we're doing in the consortium and having Verizon part of that, to really advance this. The path to commercialization and getting all this is the most important thing, right? And let's not lose sight of that. And that's what we see in terms of these drone corridors.
Thanks, Jerry. Theory, would you like to comment from a network infrastructure supplier point of view about how you might be thinking about the environment and how the software stack or the network optimization parameters may be changed as a result of what we learned?
Yeah, no, I would just add a little bit to what Jerry said. Of course, it's working with Verizon, working through the standards organizations and accelerating how we optimize the radio network. What are the techniques that we can apply in the radio network to mitigate the interference, optimize the network to support the US applications, but also support terrestrial applications on the same network, whether it's different technologies that you apply on the radio side. I want to maybe add a different element to what Jerry said about looking forward. I think there's also opportunities for Opengen to look at new network architectures. And we can look at not just having terrestrial networks that support drone applications, but we can also look at putting networks themselves on drones, on high altitude platforms, and looking at completely different ways of deploying the network capabilities, hybrid architectures, and so forth. So I think that's also an exciting area that we should look at, of not just the the network we have optimized for drone applications, but what are completely different disruptive architectures, and really thinking differently about it.
And I would like, these are great comments, and I would like to add that in looking ahead and trying being forward looking, we are, I mean, in addition to the experimentation, we are working already with simulation of the scenarios that we cannot experiment with yet, right? So this is another activity that we didn't mention, but it's ongoing with the consortium where we are experimenting to anticipate what we are simulating to anticipate what the experiments that we are going to perform, and also to perform what if scenarios that we cannot experiment with.
Sure. If I may jump in real quick, Terry, you brought up an interesting point earlier about how cloud and edge compute are really kind of driving this transformation. But what's interesting is, and a lot of people probably overlook this, is it's also transforming the FAA. All of our air traffic management systems today are bespoke and prem-based and on a closed loop. There's no federated networks or cloud technologies really used in the FAA today. So this is all transformational. And we really see a lot of engagement between FAA and FCC. A lot of the regulatory groups are now working together to solve these problems. And so what I think is unique about the coalition, somebody asked the question about what does Nokia and 5G and Verizon but bring to this or offer, is really this new trusted autonomy kind of a framework that's never had to exist in the past. It's always been this closed loop that the FAA would manage at a global level across the US with all the entrants into that national airspace. And now we're seeing this whole group emerge out of this trusted autonomous framework. So organizations like Skyward and Aloft and Nokia and Verizon and ourselves are all helping to create this whole new transformational network that, quite frankly, has never been seen before in this space.
Yeah, great comment. I'd like to announce the results of some of our polls. Layla, I'm going to do the first one, and you can take over on the second one. So for poll A, the results were government 31%, business enterprise 23%, and network 15%.
And okay, I'm trying to look at the results here and see if I can. So for poll B, what I see is new product and service enablement 37%, and ties at 27% for more secure operations and operational efficiency.
Yeah, thanks for everyone who's been participating in the polls. Keep doing that. We have more polls during every session during the day, so you'll keep your fingers a little bit busy, as well as we'll get some great feedback that we can share with everyone about how the industry is looking at all these different questions. Let's move on to any last questions before we close up this panel session. Maybe I'll open it up to the three or the four of you, and including myself. What last question would we like to talk about that would be interesting in terms of what we're doing in the drone experimental hub and range there that everyone would like to know?
I would actually take a slightly different angle and not just talk about the drone use case, but really say that when we think about what Mike also talked about in terms of leading in the 5G era for enterprise, for industrial, not just the consumer applications but really the enterprise industrial applications. It's really all about how you build that, how you increase productivity, efficiency, safety in these enterprise industrial applications. It's all about automation. It's all about building autonomous systems. And it's not just drones. Drones is, in my opinion, the leading use case from an autonomous robotic system, but it also touches a lot of other use cases. And I think what we're doing with drones, being sort of the leading edge use case and being the use case that challenges and stretches the capabilities of the technology, the lessons learned that come from building the drone use cases over 5G will have tremendous value for a lot of other use cases in the industrial enterprise automation space.
Great comment, Theory. Yeah, I agree. Jerry and Ken, anything that you'd like to add?
Well, I'm going to be short here. I think we should not lack ambition. We should really look at scale. And the use cases that we have thus far, will extend But as Trudy points out, a lot of this is actually even combining or convergent. Just throwing a quick example, the first responder hazmat that we have talk to drone, but in reality, if we really look at that use case, in a area where you have contamination, there will be robots and ground vehicles. How can we actually look and really take that on in a multi-domain or multimodal collaborative, right, where we have the humans or the responders safe, but can really efficiently address the situation. And if we look at the breadth of the verticals that we have, it's not just you just have the drone. A lot of it is actually enabled by a lot of the verticals adapting 5G, right? And then taking on this breakthrough technology. And there is certainly reuse in a lot of economy of scale. And if we can achieve that within the consortium to build infrastructure specific now to drones that quite frankly does not exist today, working with the network of 5G networks, right? And if we can get closer to get all the other parties on the table to make that happen, I think that is the unique opportunity that the consortium does, right? To look at commercialization, not as a far future, right? But near term, if not today.
So the last thing I would add was, kind of think about these testing in terms of, and a little bit on what Jerry said, is the intermodal. What's the art of the possible? The intermodal transportation we see is really kind of the holy grail. If you think about this today, warehouses and ports already have trucks, trains, automobiles coming in, picking up goods, and now we're adding drones to that mix. It's how do you interconnect all those and intercompany logistics and things like that? When people order products today from Amazon or other types of delivery companies or merchandisers, they don't really care how it's delivered. They just want it when they want it. Well, now you have to add drones to that mix, and it could be cargo. And so as you think about this evolution of UAS to advance air mobility, what are those new capabilities, those new services that help interconnect all of those logistics going forward? So it really is about integrating terrestrial vehicles or autonomy with air-based autonomy. And that is really, I think, the holy grail of what a UAS test site could provide. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank our three panelists for joining us today. Thank you, Thierry. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Ken. It's really informative, and appreciate you being able to come in and support Opengen today during this webinar. Leila, would you like to comment on some of your takeaways before we close?
Yeah, no, first I would like also to thank Terry and Ken and Jerry for this great discussion. And I definitely agree with the last comment that Ken made also, that the opportunity of experimenting with drones, and Terry also mentioned that opens a lot of the benefits to the other verticals. So a lot of what we will learn from the drone experimentation and use cases will let us think of how to address challenges, for instance, on the ground vehicles, vehicle-to-vehicle communications, on robotics at the ground, smart cities, and many other verticals that we may look at. So this is definitely the vertical or use case that we selected with that in mind as well. So
yeah, those are great points, Leila. I think for my takeaways, just starting from the earlier part of the day, we learned from Laurie about transformational change and why ecosystem collaboration is required to make those changes today for 5G. And from Mike Rogers, we learned about the great power competition and how industry has to work together in the Western countries to be able to make 5G a reality and explore the different use cases required. And from this panel, obviously, some really great information on how 5G will connect across the different verticals, as you mentioned. It's really not just about the first use case of drones. It's about all the other vertical use cases that we'll learn about along the way that are built on the data that we collect from the network and the use cases for the UAS. So it's been a fantastic start to the summit. I hope everyone has enjoyed the morning as it's gone so far. We're going to be taking a break now to give everyone a time to catch up on their emails, their meetings, probably get another cup of coffee or tea. I'd like to invite everyone to come back and join us at 11:30 this morning Eastern to hear the keynote from Ericsson's own Paul Challoner, who will be talking at 11:30. So we'll see you then, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.